that's going to look different for everybody, but it's not selfish to want something for yourself. And I would even venture to say it makes you a better mom if you do have something for yourself, because our kids need to see that it's okay to follow their own passions and chase their own dreams, because they're learning from us. They're seeing, and nobody wants a martyr as a mom, right? We don't want that typical, if anybody's watched like Everybody Loves Raymond, nobody wants that mom that's always like, I've given up everything for you, that sort of thing. You definitely want to keep your sense of self and have something that makes you enjoy, every day that's outside of your kids. It's a lot of pressure to put on your kids to have them be the only thing that you enjoy in life.
Yeah. I saw that you had a free download on your website about how to write a book, when you're staying home with your kids, which I actually immediately downloaded.
I love it.
I'm working on my second book and I have no idea what's happening with it, but I'm getting there. So that's something that I'm going to have to do. And so I wanted to get some of those tips that you had. So give us a sneak peek at some of those things that helped you.
So what helped me, and of course, I am not an expert. I've only written one book thus far, but what I can tell you is it's okay if it looks really piecemealed and really crazy. So for me, I had just like a Mead notebook that I carried around the house with me. So, if the kids were in the bath and I obviously had to be in there with them, I would have my notebook and jotting different ideas for either like chapter outlines or ideas that would just come to me. While I'm cooking dinner, I'd have that notebook and run over and scribble something down, then go back to the ground beef, right? So it happens a lot in just those in-between times, because you're not always going to have hours and hours to sit down and crank out a book. And sometimes I think it's better that way, because it gives your brain kind of time to marinate on it and kind of, I don't know, the way I write, half of it's written in my head before I ever get it down. And so I'll just kind of keep replaying how I want to start a paragraph or something in my head. And so I think taking those little moments that are unexpected, even like I said, this book began on the notes app of my phone, while I was nursing, all throughout the night. So, don't be afraid to record those ideas down in non-traditional ways. There's no way that it has to look. I mean, before I wrote Detoured, I really did think I would probably have to go rent a cabin in the woods, to be considered a real writer that was serious about the craft and all of that.
But, and talk about pressure if you actually did that. Like, oh my gosh, if I don't write half this book this week, I have nothing.
And that's when writer's block is going to hit, because anytime I have to sit down and do something, it'll take me, an hour just to get into the thing where I'm just throwing out whole paragraphs because I'm like, oh, that's not going to work or whatever. So I would say just let it look however it's going to look, and take whatever time and opportunity that you have. It's not that it's not a sacrifice, because there were several times in the writing of this that my husband would take the kids out for the day. And that was my big chunk writing time. I would take those 5 or 6 hours and just hammer it out. And I had to kind of give up the desire for it to be perfect and just write whatever I could write, and then know and give myself the permission. Okay, you can go back and edit this later. Right now, just word vomit all over the page, and then do the rest later. So it's going to look really messy. It just is, but it doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
So my question is, how did you take all those notes and writing in the cracks and put them together? Because that's sort of a place that I'm at right now. I'm, very disorganized. So how do you put it all together and make sense of it?
So I, like I said, I have one sitting next to me right now. I live with notebooks. I just have stacks of notebooks.
Not a bad thing.
I just have stacks of notebooks. But I would take it, and if I would look at all of the different ideas that I had recorded in the last week or two or whatever, and I would try to see if there was a common theme that I could trace throughout them. So, it was more like bullet points of things that I knew I wanted to touch on. And so then I would look at the bullet points and I would think, okay, how could I combine this? What chapter would this best fit in? Is this more of talking about loneliness? Is this more talking about the reality of being home, the monotony of being home? And so I really kind of tried to categorize it that way. And then when I did have those times to sit down, I would look at those bullet points, and then I would just start writing. And I would just make sure that I was hitting those bullet points as I was going through. And that's not to say that, before I turned in the manuscript, obviously, and before I even put together a proposal with like my 3 sample chapters and everything. I reworked those to make sure that the paragraphs all flowed together, because it was pretty fragmented when I first had it there. And then when I went back and reread it, I would see, okay, well, this paragraph looks like, it actually needs a lead into the next. And how could I bridge that between the two? So it was just kind of a lot of it's kind of like putting together a puzzle. But I had to give myself the freedom that it was going to look really bad to begin with.
And like the great thing, obviously, about traditional publishing is that they give you an editor.
Yes.
Which is a godsend, because I know that I looked into getting my book edited before I got a book deal, and it was just too expensive. There's no way I couldn't have done it. And so that's the one downside of I guess self-publishing, is you don't have that opportunity to really get a good editor in there. So that means a lot. So obviously now we're in sort of a lot of moms are staying home, but we don't have some of those options about getting out and like joining a MOPS group and all that stuff. So, but I'm sure that you have a lot of ideas and suggestions about stuff to do at home, because a lot of times we do have to stay at home, especially if you have really little ones. We have nap time. You got to have nap time. Like I've got to be home every day by 12:30. So that my little one can get in a 2 to 3 hour nap. Like I'm not missing out on that. So, but instead of just nap time, now we have like all day. So what are some of the ideas that you're putting out there now for moms that are all of a sudden at home and spending a lot more time with their kids than they previously were?
Yeah. So, even though our options have kind of gotten a little bit smaller, the advice is still the same. You still have to have things that you're doing for yourself every single day. It's not selfish. You have to do it. It's a necessity. It's totally that whole, thing of putting on the oxygen mask on yourself before you do it for your kids, because if you're not running at full capacity, then they won't be either. And so, just here recently, I have had a treadmill and an elliptical in our playroom for, I can't tell you how long. And now I am on those things every single day without fail. And I know working out is like the last thing we want to do, but honestly, it gets out so much of that tension and that stress that we're all holding so tightly. So even if it's a yoga video or something that you watch, even if it's something that you do with your kids, because my kids love workout videos and we love like the dance videos on YouTube or whatever, that's something that feels like, I don't know, that you're doing something a little more adult-esque than just heating up chicken nuggets all day. Also on Facebook, I have a moms group. We've been together since our first kids were born in 2011. And we span the whole nation. And so that has been really integral in Sanity, of just checking in with other moms that are in the same scenario. So finding a group of women online that you can relate to that are in the same boat. I know they're saying, still take walks, still get outside. I think that's vital. That's super important to get that fresh air. I mean, I don't think I've realized how healing fresh air is until all of this has happened. I'm like, no, we have to be outside in the sun a little bit. So all of those things, taking the time to make yourself a cup of tea, taking 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever it is, to sit down and read a book. I know we always say like, we don't have time for these things, but I don't know. I've always found that, the longer I push it off, and then when I finally sit down and I finally do it, I'm like, oh, this is so good. This is so relaxing. This is just what I needed. And so ignore the dishes in the sink. Those aren't going anywhere. The laundry isn't going anywhere, and it looks like we're going to be in this for the long haul. So take the time to do things that are filling you up every day, that give you just kind of like that deep, that ability to take a deep breath and then go back into it, because, a refreshed mom is a good mom, and that's what you need.
And when do you do that most of the time? Do you get up early, or are you doing it during nap time?
See, okay, so my kids don't nap anymore. Unfortunately, this is like the saddest thing in the world.
So sad when that happens.
They both gave it up, I swear, like the day they turned 3. And I was like, why? Why is this happening right now?
Exactly.
And so for me, it looks like I sit down with my breakfast and my coffee every single morning. I try to fit in like Bible time, or I'll read a little bit of a book that I'm finding helpful. And so I look for times when my kids are kind of entertained on their own. So if they're doing something, instead of me placing guilt on myself for why am I not playing with them? Why am I not doing this? Why am I not doing that? I realize that, okay, you've been working hard all day, doing everything. It's okay to take this time for myself. And I think that's kind of the biggest struggle that we all face, is that inner voice or that sense of guilt of like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this right now. There's so much other things that I could be doing, but it's so important. It's so important. So even if that looks like, okay, they're going to color for a little bit, and while they color, I'm reading a book, or they're entertained even with, dare I say, a video game, or they're on their iPad.
Cartoons.
I know, they're doing something, with a screen, heaven forbid. That's the time that I'm going to take for myself to do something that's going to ultimately give me the mileage to last the rest of the day.
Right. Oh, wait, I just lost my train of thought. I had a question and it just escaped me. Oh, I was going to ask, what are your thoughts on, because I don't know about you, but I've just been absolutely bombarded with people sending me, here's what to do with your kids. Like, like activities and lessons and Facebook Lives with drawing and da 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 da. And I feel a little overwhelmed by all the things being thrown at me. What should we be making of all of this? Just pick and choose, or how have you been handling it?
I think it's whatever works for your family. I've been at the stay-at-home mom thing for 8.5 years now. And so I've been telling my husband, I'm like, life hasn't really changed for us. I homeschool too. So I'm like, we just keep going the way that we've kind of always gone. But, I think that you have to be kind of careful not to put even more pressure on yourself to do all of these activities, because it's not going to make it enjoyable for anyone. And so, for us, that's looked like, somebody's been sending out these links with like all the different like live animal cams from like the zoos and all of that. So we've been taking time in the morning to go check in with the zoo animals and see what they're doing, what they're having for breakfast. And we have a conversation about them and that sort of thing. Or, I put together one of those lists of, keeping your kids busy during this time. And mainly what was on that list was like, whatever they're typically playing, like, just let them play. Like, I'm a kid of the 80s, a child of the 80s. So my parents weren't trying to schedule every minute of my life. Not only was I that, but I was an only child until I was almost 11. So I found a lot of ways to like entertain myself. And so when I see that my kids are interested in something, like lately they've been loving like kinetic sand and that sort of thing, I'm just like, then buy more kinetic sand. Like whatever it is that they're interested in, let them just do that. I also think it's great to give them the free range to have some more responsibility. So if they're wanting to make their own lunch, or if they're wanting to, help with laundry or do whatever, I think, I just think we just have to take the pressure off of ourselves, because more activities don't necessarily mean that our kids are going to be more well-rounded or even more entertained. I think that boredom is not such a bad thing. In summary.
And I found, and I am totally not a mom that is against TV. So let me preface this by saying that. But sometimes I find that I'm very